Have you ever wondered how real estate investors are able to buy property after property after property? Like, do they just have like unlimited funds, like a bucket where they can just go into and there's so much money that they can just buy whatever they want? Or they just turn a knob and it just rains cash on them? I highly doubt it. Okay, that's absolutely not the case. They're actually using a very specific loan program designed just for real estate investors. And I want to show you how these investors use these types of loan to get very, very wealthy. And sometimes they'll even do it without any money of their own. And I know you might think, oh, this sounds like some sort of weird scam. Who are they ripping off? They're not. They're just borrowing money. They're bringing people in on the deal. And this is how they're winning. And they are creating consistent cash flow by acquiring properties over the long term. I'm going to show you the type of program that they use and how you could potentially use one. If you're somebody who might be sitting on some cash on the sideline saying, hey, I want to get into real estate, I want to buy an investment property, but I just don't know how they do this. Or maybe you're somebody who you have pooled some money together with maybe friends and family and said, let's buy an investment property, something that creates cash flow. How do we do this? I'm going to show you how to do that today. What's up, guys? I'm Johnny. And if you're interested in real estate or real estate investing, I just want to give you a quick reminder to like and subscribe, show some support. I'm shamelessly asking. Thanks in advance. Now, here's what I want to do. I want to introduce you to the world of DSCR loans. Now, this type of loan has been around for a long time. It's used a lot in commercial lending, and it's definitely used a lot in the investor space for single family properties as well. The only thing is a lot of like average homeowners, they've just never heard of it, but it has actually been around forever. Now, these type of loans are the type of loans investors use when they buy multiple properties. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you my calculator that I use where you can actually calculate potential income from an investment property. It's really simple to use. It's a very easy breakdown. I have a lot of friends who are asking me, hey, how do I buy properties and how do I make sure that it cash flows? And this calculator is going to help you very, very quickly establish whether or not you have a good investment property in your hands or one that's going to cost you money. Now, here's why DSCR loans are such great loan programs. If you want to buy multiple properties, you're actually capped on the amount of conventional or FHA and certainly VA loans that you can have at any given time. The max is 10. This is a moving number. It used to be more. It could be less depending on when you're watching this. But the point is that with DSCR loans, you can actually have an unlimited amount of properties. So here's the thing. Historically with loans, the banks, when they're issuing the loans, they're looking at several things. They want to see your money in versus your money out. They want to look at your credit score and your credit history, all of these fun things. Of course, there's a lot of disqualifiers, things like bankruptcies and foreclosures, which will just take you out of the game completely. But with DSCR loans, they're only interested in a couple of different things. They want to see your credit score, but they also want to see how the property cash flows. So let me break that down a little bit. When we talk about credit score, a lot of times people get, ooh, they feel some sort of way, my credit score is not so great. But the reality is that your credit score doesn't really need to be perfect in order for you to get approved for a loan. And if it's not perfect, there is ways to bring your score up so you can get approved for a loan, okay? Now, generally speaking, the lower you go in credit score, the more adjustment you're gonna take to the rate, which just means there's gonna be more cost associated with the loan itself. You might end up in a higher rate versus if you have a better credit score, you can end up in a lower rate, which means the higher the rate, the higher the payments, okay? Now, the higher the payments might impact the property's ability to cash flow. So just keep that in mind. But here's the thing. If you get started early, you can always work towards improving your credit score, and that is the key. The next thing they're gonna look at is the property's ability to cash flow. And here's what that means. Banks are gonna look at the money that's coming in versus the money going out. So if your entire mortgage is $1,000 a month and you can rent the property for $1,000 a month, that's considered a one-to-one cash flow. If let's say the mortgage and all the expenses associated with the property is $1,000 a month, but you can only rent it for $500 a month, that's going to be a negative cash flowing property and not likely to be approved or going to be subject to additional terms, and then it gets kind of weird and sticky. So these type of loans are really great if you're wanting to buy a property for like an Airbnb, because you can actually use short-term income to help qualify for that one-to-one ratio cash flow, which would be basically an Airbnb. You can also use these for like midterm rentals, which is when you basically have somebody in the property for like 3 to 6 months. And then of course, long-term rental when you're renting a property to somebody for an extended period of time, like a year or 2 years or a 3-year lease. So some investors are going to be very, very focused on the cash flow of the property. And they might say, well, I want the property to cash flow at, let's say, 10 or 15% cash on cash return, which basically means the amount of money that they've invested versus the amount of return they're getting over 1 year. Other investors will look at a property and say, look, if I can just put some money into this property, and as long as it covers all of my expenses, and if I make a little bit of money, that's okay, because I can use it as a write-off. And for these type of people, of course, the benefit is the tax benefits. But they're also looking at the long play, and the long play is the property appreciating. And as the property goes up in value, what that does for an investor is it allows them at some point to go in and draw some of that equity. As the property value goes up, it creates some equity in that property, and they go and they take some of that money, and because they're borrowing it as a debt, it is technically tax-free. Now, I'm not giving any financial or tax advice. You have to talk to a CPA or a financial advisor if you want any of that. Now, another reason a lot of investors love these loans is because you can actually close in an LLC. And here's what I mean. When you close on a new property, you actually form an LLC, and that LLC will actually own that property. And the way I structure all my deals with my partners is we make a new LLC, and then my LLC owns a portion of that LLC, and their LLC owns a portion of that LLC. So we're completely guarded and protected. Now, there are expenses and costs that come with this, but it adds a layer of protection between business and our personal assets. Okay, so let's dig in. I'm gonna give you a quick rundown of how I would evaluate a deal. Here's the thing that you should know. Anytime you're going to do some sort of investment, you always need to make sure you do your due diligence. This calculator does not have all of the potential costs that could impact a property. That is going to be like a never-ending list. So you always need to make sure that you're really kind of doing your due diligence to protect yourself and your business partners. But what this will do is it will tell you, if I buy it for this price and rental rates are at these numbers, what's that number look like? It's also going to tell you roughly the amount of cash that you would need in order to acquire the property. Now, some people will say, look, I've got money in an IRA or some sort of, savings or whatever, and they use that money to fund these deals. Other people will go borrow this money from their friends or family, and they will fund the deal, and then they collectively will be partners on the deal. And if you remember what I said a few minutes ago about forming these LLCs and then becoming partners in the LLCs, that's usually how that works and how those type of deals are structured. So before I dig into this, I just want to give you a quick reminder to like and subscribe, show some support for your boy. I really appreciate it. Okay, so the first thing to note is that we're only going to be modifying the blue cells, and we're going to go ahead and we're just going to start with the property address. Now, it might sound obvious, but some people don't do it, and to be honest with you, sometimes I don't do it. And the problem with that is if you don't put the property address in there and then save it as the property address name, you'll never be able to go back and say where the heck did I come up with these numbers from? So I always like to make a new sheet for each property address that I'm running the scenario. So I'm gonna go ahead and just put 123 Main Street, simple enough. And then I'm gonna use some hypothetical numbers, again, only modifying the blue cells. So I wanna go ahead and put the square footage of the property, and I'm just making stuff up here. And then estimated rehab. Now, sometimes, especially with DSCR loans, you want to find a property that doesn't need a ton of work or it won't get approved. These loans are not rehab loans. They're not fix and flip loans. They're for properties that are already in really good condition. So a lot of times you don't need to do a ton of rehab, but you may need to paint, or you might need to add some flooring or change some flooring out or something. Get it to where it's in a place that might be ready for either Airbnb or a long-term rental or however you want to do that. But we want to go ahead and we want to calculate maybe a rehab cost per square foot. If it's mild and there's not a lot of work needed, we might just say it's going to be, let's say, $15 per square foot. Okay, and you'll notice that it's going to go ahead in the additional cash needed, it's going to auto-populate the rehab cash, because that's going to be money that needs to come from somewhere. So it populates that for us. And then we're going to go to the next blue cell, which is going to be the purchase price. So let's pretend like we were going to buy this property for $540,000. And you'll notice it starts populating some of these cells for us. The first, which is kind of important, is going to be the 15% down. So whenever you're doing a purchase using this type of program, you can actually do it where they only need 15% down. And sometimes they'll want more down depending on your credit score, but a lot of times you can come in with only 15% down, which is awesome. So that's going to give us our financed amount, $378,000. And then we're going to have closing costs, things like title, escrow, points, fees, things like that. We need to make sure that we calculate for that, because that is not going to be rolled into the loan. We need to come out of pocket with those expenses. So then we have an estimated cash to close number, okay? And that number is 172. Then we have additional cash needed, and we already put in there the rehab. That's already been added in for us. If we're gonna do an Airbnb, we might have to put maybe $15,000 in furniture in here. Maybe we're not using it as an Airbnb, but these are some of the things that you would put in there. Utilities while vacant, maybe it's gonna be $500 a month for 3 months, so it's $1,500. Holding costs while vacant, and we would enter that number based on the monthly expense, which we're gonna go into next. And then there's other things in here, like maybe you need a dumpster or these types of things. You wanna add everything you possibly can in there, because when you close on this property, you're gonna need some money, and you need to know what that number is because you don't wanna come up short. So then we're gonna talk about our monthly expense. Now, these type of programs, the interest rate is somewhere around 8 to 8.5%. Today, I'm not quoting rates, I'm just telling you kind of ballpark where these might be in a hypothetical scenario. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm just gonna add 8.5% in there. And you'll notice that it automatically calculates our interest-only payment at $26.78. A lot of times these type of programs are interest-only, which means that it doesn't matter how long you're in the loan for, you are never going to pay it off. You're always just going to be paying the interest portion. Now, a lot of investors like this because it keeps the cash flow there, and that's what most investors are looking for, cash flow, because as the property appreciates, that's where the equity comes in. If we were making a principal and interest payment on this property, the payment would be much higher and it might likely, kill the cash flow. So that's our number there. And then we got to add in our taxes and our insurance. These are monthly numbers. And I'm just going to kind of make some numbers up here just to kind of put them in there. You're going to have to find these numbers on county websites. That's where you can find tax rates. And then mortgage insurance, not mortgage insurance, monthly mortgage, property insurance. I'm going to use just a round arbitrary number of $125 per month because that's pretty normal. As we go up here into the fixed costs, we're going to need things like property management. So a property manager who's going to take care of putting people in the property for you, making sure that there's a problem, they're dealing with the tenants. Unless you want to be that person, you can remove this number. But a lot of times investors buy properties outside of their area. So maybe I'm in California and I own a property in Florida. I need a property manager to manage that property for me, and they are going to charge me around 5% of the monthly expense. So I need to add that in there. Monthly maintenance. This is going to be things like if there is some sort of situation with maybe something breaks in the property, something small. I mean, like like the toilet thing doesn't flush sometimes. That always seems to break in my house. I don't know why. Things like that, like these small things, a garbage disposal. You need to budget for those things because you need to have a bucket to pull from. You have things like capital reserves, and this is going to be for bigger issues, like when you need to replace the air conditioning or the heating, the HVAC or the roof. Like you need to be bucketing money every single month in order to allocate for that big expense. That's usually around 5% as well. The other things that you may want to put in here are things like if you're taking care of the trash for the tenants, if you're taking care of the HOA, you need to add these costs. The big one is going to be the HOA, because if it's long-term rentals, a lot of times we need to pay for that. So let's say it's $250 a month. And what that's going to do is it's going to give us a fixed monthly cost. In this scenario, it's $708. And then we have our total mortgage expense, which we're carrying from this bottom number over here, this $3,053, which gives us a total monthly cost of $3,760. Okay, so this is all of our costs related to this particular property. You'll notice below that, we also have our total cash invested, $211,000. That number is coming from our estimated cash to close, plus our additional cash needed for things like we budgeted, furniture and, rehab and these types of things. So you need $211,800 in this scenario. So then what we're gonna do is we're gonna continue down this sheet and we're gonna look at our estimated rent amounts. Now we have a short-term rental, a mid-term rental, and a long-term rental. So short-term rentals are going to be like basically Airbnbs or VRBOs. And I'm going to put some resources in the description so you can go find these numbers based on where the property is. I'm not an affiliate for any of those. They're just resources that you can use to kind of go see, like, if I was going to buy a property and make it an Airbnb, what is the estimated amount of money I might bring in every single month for a property like this. Some really great resources. Same with the long-term rentals. But basically, a short-term rental is going to be, an Airbnb. Mid-term rental is going to be something like traveling nurses who travel in and work at different hospitals for different reasons. Long-term rentals is going to be basically people who are in the property for a year, 2 years, 3 years, okay? And those numbers are going to all be different. The short-term rentals usually are going to be higher. You're going to make more money, but it's also going to be seasonal. I'm going to plug in a short-term rental amount. I'm going to say it's, let's say, $6,000 estimated a month for like an Airbnb. Midterm, or actually I'm going to move down to long-term, because generally long-term is going to be the lower amount of money that you're going to make. So I'm going to call this one, I don't know, let's call it $3,800 a month. Okay, just to use round numbers. Now, usually a midterm rental is going to be somewhere between 20 and 30% higher per month than a long-term rental. So I'm just going to add I'm going to add $600 on top of this, and I'm going to use $4,400 for a midterm rental, just for lack of a better example. And you'll see what it does over in the cash on cash return area. We have a short-term rental is going to be cash on cash, basically 13%. We have 3.62%, and then we basically long-term, we have a break even. So it's going to depend on the type of investor who is buying the property. So there are risk tolerances, right? Like if I'm going to buy a property and use it for Airbnb, like that might be a little bit risky because a lot of cities and counties are like basically outlawing Airbnbs, and that creates a little bit of a problem. But the return is higher while you have it. So again, it's going to depend on the investor and the risk tolerance. Obviously, a long-term rental is going to be much better. It's going to be more stable, but the return is not going to be there. Now, some people might not care if you can buy the property at a discount and you know it's going to appreciate over time. A lot of people have this type of strategy where they're buying properties, they put a renter in there, and it's not necessarily making them money every month, but it is appreciating, and that is kind of like their goose egg or their nest egg. So at some point they can sell it and they will be able to bring that money in and retire on it. So this is how you would calculate whether or not a property is going to cash flow. And again, it's going to depend on with the type of investor you are in terms of what you want those numbers to look like. But hopefully this provided some value. Don't forget to like and subscribe. You can get access to this calculator in the description down below. Again, thank you guys for tuning in. Y'all have a great day. God bless.